Welcome back. Have you ever heard of Lizzie Halliday? It's a very fascinating last name. I guess it was a play on words of some kind. Holiday, not really a holiday when hanging out with her. In fact, it would be a nightmare, and you'll find out soon why that is. Let me narrate the details they have here on Wikipedia concerning this case that occurred way back in the late 1800s again. They stated the following. Lizzie Halliday was an Irish-American serial killer responsible for the deaths of 4 people in upstate New York during the 1890s. In 1894, she became the first woman to be sentenced to death by the electric chair. Her sentence was commuted though, and she spent the rest of her life in a mental institution. She killed a nurse while institutionalized and is speculated to have killed her first 2 husbands. So yesterday we were talking about a man that killed his wives. Now we're talking about a woman that killed her husbands, or at least is speculated to have done so. Perhaps they would have been better for each other, to date each other. Maybe they'd find happiness in some morbid way. Now they do have some biographical information concerning her past, and this is what it has to say. Lizzie Halliday was originally named Eliza Margaret McNally. She was born around 1859 in County Antrim, Ireland. Her family moved to the US when she was young, given as aged 3 or 8. In 1879, she married a Greenwich man known by the alias Charles Hopkins, when his real name was Catesby Brown. They are said to have had one son who ended up institutionalized. In 1881, after Hopkins' death, she married a pensioner named Artemus Brewer, but he also died less than a year later. Her third husband, Hiram Parkinson, left her within their first year of marriage. Guess he was smart. She went on to marry George Smith, a war veteran who had served with Brewer. After a reported failed attempt to kill Smith by putting arsenic in his tea, Lizzie fled to Bellows Falls, Vermont. She married Vermont resident Charles Plaistow, but she vanished 2 weeks later. In the winter of 1888, she resurfaced in Philadelphia when she turned up at a saloon on 1218th North Front Street that was run by the McKillans. Friends she knew from Ireland. Going by the name Maggie Hopkins, Lizzie set up a shop, but was later convicted of burning it down for the insurance money. She was sentenced to 2 years at Philadelphia's Eastern State Penitentiary. In 1889, now going by the name Lizzie Brown, she became the housekeeper for Paul Holliday, a twice widowed 70-year-old farmer living in Birmingham, New York with his sons. Their marriage was marked by what Holliday described as Lizzie's sporadic spells of insanity. Within 2 years, the Hollidays' family's house and barn burned to the ground, and Lizzie was suspected of setting the fires. At some point, she stole a team of horses and had a neighbor help her drive them to Newburgh, New York, where she sold them. She was acquitted of the crime on the grounds of insanity. Accounts vary as to this happening in 1890 or 1893. In May 1891, the Holliday Mill residence barn burned to the ground, killing Holliday's mentally handicapped son John. Lizzie was again suspected of setting the fire since she was known to have disliked John. She was arrested and sent to an asylum, transferred to another but then declared cured and released, returning home to Holliday. Paul Holliday disappeared in August of that year. Lizzie claimed he had gone to a nearby town to do some masonry work. Following the neighbor's suspicions that something was not right about Lizzie's story, a search warrant was obtained, and on September 4th, the bodies of 2 women were found buried in hay in a barn. Both had been shot. The women were later identified as Margaret and Sarah McCullen, New York residents who were part of the family Lizzie had stayed with in Philadelphia. Little could be ascertained from Lizzie, as when questioned, she behaved in an erratic manner, tearing at her clothes and talking incoherently. She was kept in custody, and some thought she was merely faking insanity. A few days after the McCullens were found, Paul Holliday's mutilated body was discovered under the floorboards of his house. He had also been shot. Lizzie was charged with the murders and held for trial at the Sullivan County Jail in Monticello, New York. During her first few months there, she refused to eat, attacked the sheriff's wife, set fire to her own bed, tried to hang herself and cut her own throat with broken glass, about which she said, "I thought I would cut myself to see if I would bleed." Her jailers were forced to chain her to the floor during her remaining months there. While she was in jail, Lizzie received national attention, with one sensational story after another appearing across the country in tabloid newspapers. The New York World portrayed Lizzie's case as unprecedented and almost without parallel in the annals of crime. She was also covered by the World's Nellie Bly, who eventually managed to get an interview with Lizzie in which she revealed her previous marriages, facts Bly was able to confirm. Another useful source for reporters was Robert Holliday, Paul Holliday's son. The Sullivan County Sheriff stated a new round of speculation when he told the press that Lizzie was probably connected to the Jack the Ripper murders, although no connection was ever made. The revelation that she had been married 5 times before she met Paul Holliday, that 2 of her husbands died less than a year after their weddings, and that Lizzie had tried to poison a third led the press to speculate that she was responsible for at least 6 deaths. Whether these men died natural deaths or were murdered is not known. The New York Times noted in June 1894. Lizzie also made a claim, confided to Robert Halliday, that she had killed a husband in Belfast, but had managed to conceal the crime. On June 21, 1894, Holliday was convicted at the Sullivan County Oyer and Terminer Court for the murder of Margaret McCullen and Sarah J. McQuillan. She became the first woman ever to be sentenced to death by electrocution. Via New York State's new electric chair, Governor Roswell P. Flower commuted her sentence to life in a mental institution after a medical commission declared her insane. She was sent to the Matteawan State Hospital for the Criminally Insane, where she spent the remainder of her life. In 1906, she killed a nurse, Nellie Wicks, by stabbing her 200 times with a pair of scissors. 200 times! Man, I've covered some crazy cases over the past where stabbings did occur. I don't think I've ever had a case where there were 200 stab wounds on a victim. That's usually the sort of murder involving rage, pure freaking rage for someone that is alive in your line of sight. It's crazy. And eventually she died on June 28, 1918. So I guess in a way she died comfortably. It doesn't say that she had some disease or heart attack or anything. I guess she just passed away being in a mental institution. But it's absolutely crazy, that final sentence here. Oh, let's throw in here some more details for the reader, that she killed a nurse by stabbing them 200 times. Good night. That's sort of how this article ends. Well, I don't know about you, but it's another crazy case, and it's also interesting to see that again they kind of connected it to Jack the Ripper. There was this other case that I did yesterday concerning someone that murdered servant girls, where they also speculated that perhaps he was Jack the Ripper. Back when that guy was alive, or if it was a woman, but let's assume Jack the Ripper was a man. It really held a grasp on the world. I mean, it's a very mysterious murderer. I remember I used to make a video about that years ago on my old CreepyNews. I don't have it backed up, but maybe I'll make a new one or maybe I won't. We'll see over time. Because I'd like to now focus on cases I haven't done before in general. So at least it keeps it interesting for me as well. Well, that's all there is that they had concerning this case. And this lovely sketch that was on screen all the time is supposedly a portrait of the perpetrator, Lizzie. Anyways, as always, dear viewer, have sweet dreams.